story is from Chile and is from in period as far as we can tell according to anthropologists. Delgadina lived in a little house with her mother that was halfway between the forest and the ocean. And every day, Delgadina would go through the forest into town to trade and for water and everything. And when she came back through the forest, she would pick up little twigs and stones and bits of moss and bring them home and put them in a little box that she kept in under her bed where she was building a tiny forest. And one day, on her way home, she found a teeny, tiny, little red snake. And she picked it up and she said, "Oh, my little red snake, how small you are." And she brought it home and she put it in the tiny forest that she kept under her bed. And before she went to bed, she gave it a little kiss, slid it under there, and when she woke up, the snake had grown 3 times its size. And that happened every night. She would give it a little kiss, "Good night, my little red snake," and she would wake up and the snake had grown 3 times its size. And pretty soon it filled her whole room. And the next day it filled the entire house. And Delgadina's mother said, "Delgadina, we do not have room for this snake. Tell it to go and live back in the forest where it will have enough space." And so she climbed over all the different coils of the snake till she got to its head, and she said, "Oh, my little red snake, my mother says we don't have room for you in our house, and you have to go and live in the forest." And so the snake slithered and turned and twisted, and they got out into the forest, and every day Delgadina would gather as much food as she could and bring it to her little red snake, where he had found like a good cave to live in. And she'd go to the mouth of the cave and feed the snake until eventually, pretty soon actually, Delgadina's mother said, "Delgadina, we cannot afford to keep feeding this snake. Tell him to go and live in the sea where he can find his own food." And so Delgadina went to the mouth of the cave and she said, "My little red snake." And the huge red snake slithered and turned and twisted till he got up to the mouth of the cave, and he said, "Delgadina," because of course he could talk, I mean, he's clearly magic, "what do you want?" And Delgadina said, "My little red snake, my mother says that we cannot afford to keep feeding you, and you have to go and live in the sea where you can find your own food." And so the two friends traveled through the forest to all the way out past the house to the ocean. And the snake got himself all turned around till just his head was out up on the beach, and he said, "Delgadina, take your hands and put them on my eyes 3 times. So she did, right? 1, 2, 3. And he said, "Now rub your hands together. Delgadina, every time you wash your hands and shake your fingers dry, gold and jewels will fall from your hands instead of water droplets, and you will never be too poor for anything ever again." Good gift. And so he turned and he went off into the ocean, and he was going to have to spend a considerable amount of time looking for food with his size, so they knew they probably wouldn't see each other for quite some time. Well, it did not take very long for word to travel that suddenly Delgadina and her mother were well off. And people are not always great at keeping secrets, so news spread quickly. plea that there was this beautiful, kind, lovely young woman who could shake treasure from her hands. And that news reached the king. And all of his advisors, now he was a young king and not yet wed, so all of his advisors were like, okay, I think we have a good queen candidate here, based on the available information. And also living at the capital, however, was a bitter, angry old woman, like they put in stories all the time. And she wanted her daughter to marry the king. And so he's like, well, okay, how do we send? We should send a messenger or something to this young woman. And she goes, Your Majesty, I know Delgadina's mother. So just give me a carriage with 4 white horses and a dress of diamonds and pearls, and I will bring Delgadina to you. And so, of course, he was like, well, great, you know her mother. He was happy to agree. And so she takes off, and she had put her own daughter in the dress of diamonds and pearls and put her in the corner of the carriage, I assume behind a curtain where no one would see her. That part was not clear. And they go off down to the little village by the sea and out through the forest to the little house where Delgadina had lived for her entire life. And the woman pulled up in this gorgeous golden carriage and the horses and everything, and she came out, and so of course Delgadina and her mother, they put on their best dresses, and they came out, oh, who is this, you know? And the old woman said, Delgadina, I am a messenger from His Majesty. And I'm going to bring you, he is very interested, so I am going to bring you out of your little village. You're going to leave home for the first time. It'll be great. And, you know, Mother, don't worry. We'll send a messenger for you, too. Just hold on. Bide your time. I'm going to take Delgadina now. And we're going to go, and you're going to meet the king. It's going to be fabulous. And so she put her in the carriage. Now, at this point, no, she does not see the other girl in the carriage. This is why I assumed there was a curtain. And so they go off. And they're going along down the road. And Delgadina's looking out the window. She's so excited. She's leaving home for the first time. And she realizes as they start taking the paths through, you know, past her village, they aren't turning around to go towards the capital. They're turning up to go to the cliffs that overlook the sea. And she beat on the window for the old woman to stop, but the old woman did not stop until she got to the cliffs. The old woman jumped off the front of the carriage. She opened the door, grabs Delgadina, and tore out her eyes. I know, right? And threw her off the cliff into the sea. Didn't see that one coming, did you? And so then she takes her own daughter and puts her in the center of the carriage, I assume no longer behind the curtain, and goes off to the capital. And she presents her own daughter to the king of, this is Delgadina, your majesty. And Delgadina, and the king is like, oh, great, it's wonderful to meet you. I've heard so many good things. And the advisors say, so how about those treasure hands? And Delgadina, the imposter, says, well, I really think that the bounty of my magical powers should wait until after the wedding. And so the king, having made a marriage proposal and, you know, all of his advisors agreeing, they quickly went to have the wedding between the king and Delgadina. And the king had some concerns. He had heard that she had gorgeous, long, dark hair and beautiful dark eyes. And this girl had short, lighter brown curly hair and more of a hazel eyes, and things can change as rumors spread, and he had heard how kind she was, and this girl did not show evidence of being overly kind, so he had some worries, And he went to the cooks because the advisors were really moving forward with the whole wedding situation. And he went to his cooks and he said, for the feast, I would really like the greasiest, gooeyest, gobbiest chicken you can possibly cook. And no table utensils and no towels at the hand-washing basins. And so, the king, against his better judgment, was married. And at the feast, everyone came, including obviously the bride, and everyone ate chicken. And everyone's hands were a mess. And so they went to wash their hands, and there were no towels. So, of course, they had to shake their fingers dry. And when she shook her fingers dry, did gold and jewels fall from her hands? Of course not. And the king was about to say, "Ha-ha, imposter." And she beat him to it. She said, "Ha, I married you and I lost all my magic." And she stomped out into the courtyard.
Nice. Nice.
But perhaps you might be wondering, what happened to Delgadina?
What happened to Delgadina, Thyri?
Thank you for asking. So, Delgadina, in a stroke of good luck reserved for these kinds of stories, fell off the cliffs having had her eyes torn out, and she did not hit any of the jaggedy rocks below. In fact, there was some very convenient driftwood that she was able to grab onto and just hang on, literally for dear life, as the ocean took her out into the sea. And she just kept clinging to that piece of driftwood for what felt like an eternity, until finally she felt her feet brush against sand, and she stumbled up onto a shore. And she was very tired, so she passed out. And who should find her there but, of course, the conveniently placed hermit that just so happened to live on this island. He found Delgadina and he nursed her back to health over the days that came, and she was devastated. She was blind, she was lost, and every day she would walk to the edge of the island until she could feel the waves lap against her feet. And she would sing out across the water, "I wish I could go home again. My mother I would see, for she is somewhere far away, across this endless sea." And her song would bubble out over the oceans. And sometimes, if the wind and the currents were just right, it would echo down into the ocean to the bottom of the sea. And who do you think was sleeping there?
The king.
The red snake, exactly. He heard her song and he swam towards it. He got up to the island one morning just as she was finishing, and he said, "Delgadina, what has happened to you?" And she said, "My little red snake." And she told him the whole story. And he said, "Delgadina, take your hands and put them on my eyes." And she did. Took her a while, but she got there. "Now put your hands on your own eyes." And when Delgadina opened her eyes, she could see again. Well, she quickly went back and washed her hands and shook her fingers dry 9 times so that the hermit who lived alone on an island with nobody to purchase things from would have a pile of gold and never want for anything ever. And then she went back to shore and she climbed on the neck of the snake, and he swam and swam and swam all the way back to the capital, and he rose up over the walls of the sea. The capital is by the sea, I forgot to say that, the castle's right there. And it rose up over the walls, and they're coming up over just as the imposter is storming out. I married you when I lost all my magic. And she storms out into the courtyard, and then there's a giant red snake with a chick on the back. And the king comes out, and Delgadina sees the old woman and the daughter, who's still wearing the dress of diamonds and pearls, and she sees them, and she sees immediately what has happened, and she goes, "You!" because she's pretty pissed at this point. And the snake is like, "Okay, I see how this is." And the old lady's like, "Oh, I see how this is." And she grabs her daughter and throws her in the carriage with the 4 white horses, and they take off, and they're out the door and down the road, and the king does not know what to do. He stamps his foot on the ground 3 times, and the snake takes that as permission. So he dives back into the water, swims around, goes underneath the ground, and he burrows and burrows until he's right under the road, and he can hear the carriage coming above him. And then he shook, and he shook, and he shook until the ground was blown to bits, and that was the end of them. And the king, having just got married to the wrong Delgadina, now met Delgadina. And he said, "Young lady with a giant red snake who just blew up the road, hi." And she said, "Oh, hello, your majesty. My name is Delgadina. I'm so sorry for the damage. I can pay for it." And the king and Delgadina hit it off. And he found that she was very kind and very good. And she found that he was very wise and considerate. The 2 of them lived happily ever after with a kingdom that thrived.